Hello everybody and welcome back. Good to talk to all of you again today. And today I am going to do a video on a game called Rule the Waves, and it basically simulates the naval arms races and naval battles between 1900 and 1925. So essentially the pre-dreadnought to pretty much the more modern battleship era, although as it basically ends in 1925, you don't really deal with any kind of carrier. This is pretty much a purely surface ship game. I'm going to try my best to explain it as I go and also give you some of my thoughts. I've actually sunk a lot of hours into the game recently. Been having some pretty strange internet issues that still haven't been fully resolved. So, not really able to do a lot of online gaming, so doing a lot more of this offline game. So at the beginning of the game, when you first start up, you get to choose a bunch of nations. So for example, if you choose Great Britain, it'll tell you how much of an economy you've got, what's your budget, what kind of starting technologies you've got, what kind of perks you have, and what kind of flaws you have. So for example, I think Great Britain had like one flaw where there's like hidden flaws with their ship designs. The Germans have their own thing as well. And you basically play as sort of the major naval powers around World War I and a little bit later into like the 20s. But in this particular game, I'm going to end up playing as the Italians. Mostly because Italy is not a major sort of world colonial power, and they're a little bit easier to manage at the beginning. And for me, I'm still pretty much a beginner at this game. There's actually quite a lot of complexity for a game that is not a very sort of graphically intensive 3D game. But the gameplay, I think, has a lot of replayability, and there's a lot of depth to it. And one of the major aspects of it really has to deal with the fact that later on you actually have to figure out how to design your ships within the allotted tonnage and things like that. And that is a whole interesting thing, which I'll get to in a second. So anyways, I've just sort of gone through some of the different countries. As you can see, Japan and the US are kind of off the map, but you can play them as well. And there's also a few custom nations, I think, including Spain being one of them as well. There it is. You'll see Spain 1 and Spain 2. Alright, so I'm going to pick Italy because that's what I'm going to go with. I'm going to press OK, and there's going to be like a couple more options. So you get to pick your name, you get to choose your initial fleet size, and then you get to decide if you want to do research at like the 100% normal speed, or you want to slow the research down so that you can actually build ships with the technology and have it be of some use, instead of not having like the minute you finish the technology and you haven't built the ship yet and the technology is already out of date, right? I'm also playing with Very Technologies, and Very Technologies basically doesn't have technology develop in sort of a set order. You kind of have your scientists develop technologies maybe more at random, and that allows you to have completely different sort of pathways rather than the historical pathway, right? You can't just start with dreadnoughts. Maybe you don't get that technology for that until quite a bit later. Anyhow, this is the starting interface of the game. Like I said, it's not super graphically intensive. As you can see, most of the ship drawings and stuff like that are kind of like line drawings. Anyways, this is my starting fleet. I've got a couple of pre-dreadnoughts, I've got a couple of heavy cruisers, a couple of light cruisers, and a bunch of destroyers. I've also got a couple of ships being built, 2 battleships, and a few other things. So this is basically your main screen, and as you can see on the side, I have tension levels, and tension levels basically will dictate whether or not you're going to end up at war with someone. And it's a turn-based game, so you do press the turn button there to have your next turn happen. I'm just taking a look at what my new designs are and what kind of ships I'm likely to get, and when I'm sort of figured out all that, I'm going to go deal with research. So research, you can assign budget, and then you can also set priorities. Some things you want more on the priority scale, some things are a bit lower. You can adjust it so you'll get technologies of certain types more frequently than others, right? Me personally, I like the machinery to be more advanced, armor to be a little bit more advanced, ship designs and stuff like that to be a little bit more advanced, and guns, right? Because my ships, I like to have as many newer type guns as I can, but who knows? The technology does come at random very times, and that, can do a lot of interesting things in terms of my plans. You can also set training for your crews, and you can also not only set training, but also set things like, hey, what type of ammo do you use? How much of the loadout of ammos do you have for ships? Things like that. And that allows you to basically micromanage very minute things. For me, I really like having good gunnery and good night fighting, because night fighting is, well, if you don't have good night fighting, you'll figure out how that affects your gameplay later when you suddenly enter sort of the night phase and your battles you know, the visibility and all that goes like right down to nothing, and it gets a lot harder if you don't have good night training. Torpedo warfare, at the beginning, not super useful, but later on, it definitely starts to be more of a valid weapon system. At the beginning, the ranges are so short that not really super effective. But later on, as sort of torpedo ranges increase, torpedo warfare would be something that you might want to consider training as well. Anyways, once you decide on your training, you click execute, and of course, training costs money, and of course, you're going to notice my monthly balance immediately goes, well, quite a bit into the negative. But that's okay, because I have some ships that are going to be finished building within a couple months. You kind of have to make good sort of calculations based on how much money you've got like right now, and sort of when ships are going to finish building, and whether or not that money will last you until that period of time. There's a bit of sort of financial management as well. But it's not so simple, because your finances can potentially change based on the affairs of your nation or of interactions with other nations. For some reason, I have suddenly gotten into a not so happy situation with Germany. Well, depending on how things go with the rest of the world in terms of world tensions and things like that, if everything stays okay and I'm able to reduce tensions, then maybe I can avoid a war with Germany. But if things don't go well, then there's a good chance I might end up in a not so happy situation with them, which basically means you go to war. And that is something I will address in a little bit more. I'm also just taking a look at all of my other ships, all the destroyers, and you'll notice at the beginning the destroyers are tiny. They're like 500 tons. They have like no guns really. They're more sort of scouting, maybe screening vessels, but if your destroyer runs up against like a light cruiser, especially a reasonably well-armed light cruiser, your destroyers are going to be in trouble, and that's kind of to be expected, I guess, right? Anyways, so taking a look at my ships, I'm clicking for the next turn, and I'm getting new ships commissioning into the Navy, and you'll notice that my funds are starting to become a little bit more stabilized as ships are finished building. And you really have to consider your budget as well. Like, what can you afford? What can you build? What can you not build? You can't just go ahead and be like, I want an entire fleet full of nothing but battleships. It just doesn't work. You have to have other ships as well. You need like cruisers. You need ships that you can send out to raid, to escort convoys, all those kind of things. Okay, so there's an interesting little thing there where I have some shipyard experience, so one of my light cruisers are going to get built a little bit faster. Tensions with Germany still a little bit on the high side. I might have to consider spending some money and start collecting some possible intelligence about Germany as well. So you'll notice that there's an intel effort thing, and that'll cost you some money, but might want to consider that. Anyhow, taking a look at my light cruisers, hey, you know what? They don't look too bad. They got a bunch of 6-inch guns on them, so not too bad. All right, continuing to do my turns, right? During this part of the thing, it's a lot more sort of turn-based, and it's kind of like a lot of those turn-based strategy games out there, maybe Hearts of Iron, similar in some ways. Here we go, world events. All right, something's gone wrong somewhere in the world, and it requires some sort of response, or maybe some sort of political thing, whatever. And each of the options that you have will have different effects on your budget, on the tension levels, and things like that. So for me, I was able to increase my budget, but I increased some world tension as well. So that's not all that great. So anyhow, luckily tension didn't go up with Germany all that much, so I'm still hopeful that maybe there's a way to avoid war with them. So continuing to off for next turn to see what's going to happen. Eventually, as my other ships finish building, I'm going to start having to design newer ships, right? And depending on what kind of new technologies I end up researching, hey, I'm able to decide how to design the next ship. Okay, so France is coming over and saying, hey, we want to try to do some world stability thing. Maybe we want to do some treaties. So I'm like, hey, let's call a disarmament conference and let's see what happens. And this is another one of those limiting factors where sometimes you'll have a situation like this where it says, okay, cool, we're signing this 13-year treaty. We're limiting ships to no more than 20,000 tons, 12-inch guns, and it's going to last forever unless you go to war, right? Now, these treaties that you're signing are super cool because they actually limit your ability to design certain ships. Now, I do think one nation has the ability to cheat a little bit. I think it's everything that's not a democracy. You can cheat by like 10%, but most times if you're playing like a democracy, you're going to be limited by this limitation. And the really cool thing is your designs get influenced by these treaties a lot because, hey, on that displacement, if you want this speed, this armor, too bad. You can't really do it. So in one instance, I had a game where there was a treaty signed. It was 15,000 tons, no guns bigger than 10 inches. And what ended up happening is that we ended up building heavy cruisers, 15,000 ton displacement, and like 14 10-inch guns. And it was just like me, the computers, we all had the same sort of design ideology that went there. It was actually really cool. Anyways, ended up causing Great Britain to scrap a whole bunch of their ships, which is kind of neat because advantage to me because I didn't have anything of that size. Anyhow, skipping forward a little bit, and oh crap! A USS Maine situation has happened. One of my light cruisers blew up under mysterious circumstances, and now there's suspicion that the saboteurs in Germany are responsible. Ah, crap. Well, if I choose the first option, with the extra tension that it generates, probably gonna go straight to war. If I sacrifice some of my prestige, maybe I'm able to prevent war. Ugh, this is not looking so good. Probably gonna sacrifice some prestige here. I mean, prestige has an impact on you as well. If your prestige drops too low, there's ramifications as well. But I'm gonna sacrifice some prestige, and oh boy, look at my tension with Germany. Good lord. Might be time to design my first ship. So here we go. Here's the ship design window. Probably gonna have to build myself some additional capital ships. So I'm gonna build a pre-dreadnought because I don't have the technology required to build like battle cruisers and the bigger battleships yet. I'm gonna top it off at about 15,000 tons. I do want some more speed, so I'm gonna go like 22 knots. Going to opt for 4 12-inch guns in 2 double turrets, basically, one forward, one aft, and probably a whole bunch of secondary guns, right? Okay, after I've decided on the guns, I'm going to take a look at some of the gun data as well for these 12-inch guns. You'll notice, for example, that the engagement distances are still relatively short. We are still talking about pre-dreadnoughts, and engagement distances are not the crazy long distances. Later on, as engagement distances increase, armor layouts and things like that definitely will change. But at the beginning, probably as much belt armor as I can fit on, not so much deck armor, armor for the turrets for sure, just to keep them from being knocked out, and maybe some conning tower armor as well. So these are all decisions you'll have to make when you're doing ship design. Now, I am still, honest to God, I still am a novice in this game when it comes to ship design. And by the way, with ship design, you can do some really crazy designs. If you wanted to make an entire fleet later on, when you have the technology to go like all guns forward, you could totally do that. You could make like an entire navy worth of Nelson lookalikes from your like light cruisers all the way up to your battleships, and that could go as well, and that has certain advantages, right? Anyhow, so I'm gonna get a lot of ammo because why not? Of course, there is a weight issue, but hey, it seems like I do have extra weight right now remaining. So I'm going to increase the amount of rounds I have, because when I use some of the other battleships, I do find that there is certain ammo limitations sometimes, and sometimes I do wish I had a bit more ammo. So hey, maybe 200 rounds is going to be good. All right, 8-inch guns as the secondaries. I don't think I have the technology research for that yet, but I'll check it. There is a way to check it. There's a little red like check mark thing. If you click that, it'll tell you everything that's right and wrong with your ship. So before I do that, I think I'm just going to also throw on some underwater torpedo tubes because I still have some displacement, so why not, I guess? Who knows? Could be useful if you accidentally get like super close range, maybe. Alright, so some torpedo tubes, still got like 900 tons worth of weight remaining. Oh, and hey, look, I can't have any guns on my secondary larger than 7 inches. Alright. That's fine. I don't have accurate training elevation gear for the secondary, so there is going to be a bit of a penalty to rate of fire. Still got 1,100 tons left. Alright, so maybe increase the number of secondary guns. See, decisions you kind of got to decide on, right? And like I said, the graphics are not super fancy. It's not like, 3D models of things. No, a lot of this is, up to a bit of your own imagination on how your ship will end up looking in your own mind's eye, I guess. Hey, that's perfectly fine with me, right? The actual depth of the game is quite good, I would say. Depending on technology, depending on your own sort of refinements, you can have various different ship designs and you can try them out, and then you'd of course see how they would function in an actual battle. For example, in like I said, that previous playthrough where we all did those 15,000-ton cruisers, well, unfortunately, some of my designs weren't as good because I opted to go super speed instead of armor. And oh boy, I paid for that. Lots of magazine detonations and losing my ships in battle, so I learned, additional armor for this thing, right? I'm going to get a 10-inch belt. Don't care. It's just like as much armor as I can fit in here and keep my ship safe. Checking once again the guns. I think maybe there's going to be some adjustments to the number of secondary guns here. Eventually I'm going to get to a point where I think I'm going to be reasonably happy with the ship as a whole. And then once that's done, I've got to decide if I'm actually able to afford them, right? See, I was opting to see, could I put on tertiary guns? Would that help? And maybe not, because you have to decide whether you want them or not, right? And eventually I think I opted for just more secondary guns and like screw tertiary, right? Too many guns of too many different calibers. Maybe not a good thing. So I think this is how I ended up. I've got like 20 of these secondary guns. The graphic didn't even fully update. I don't know what happened there, but whatever. There's 20 of them, probably 10 per side. It's quite a lot of secondary guns. And I've got the big caliber guns in the front. Final thing to do, add additional lines for your superstructure. So you'll see me draw like little lines, and I'm going to try to make like a cool looking superstructure from like a top-down view. I don't know how the hell that works, but hey, when I was doing this, I thought, oh, this is really cool. I'm just going to draw these fancy little lines and design this like ship superstructure to look, I don't know, a certain way. And then once you've done that, you like put on like funnels and things like that, and you've got your top-down view, and that's kind of what you were seeing earlier when I was like looking at the ships and things like that. So, all right, come on, me, get this done with. Drawing lines, and and me being sort of OCD about lines, I'm like, I gotta get them straight too when I'm doing verticals. Like if I was doing a horizontal line or a vertical line and it didn't like turn out to be like perfectly straight, I'd be like, oh, this is not good. Okay, so anyhow, this is another portion of the game, and this is a very time-consuming portion, right? Because imagine if you had to end up designing ships for every class. Like you design all your destroyers, you design all the battleships and like cruisers and things like that. Ton of design work. You can even do, I think, like armored merchant cruisers, and you can do like motor torpedo boats or whatever. And so there's a ton of design work that can be done as well. And of course, depending on how you thought about it, you take it into battle and you'll see whether that philosophy that you had holds or not. Okay, finally, the ship has been pretty much designed, done, complete. I have to save the design. Whoa, nope, don't have torpedo defense yet. Oh yeah, okay, don't have that. All right, so there we go, everything's good. Save that design and decide whether or not I want to build it. Of course, I do have sufficient budget, so build it. Of course, the first ship of the class is going to cost a little bit more. It's kind of realistic, right? You're going to likely run into more problems with the very first ship you build. Later on, things are sort of more worked out and less issues, right? So they put that into the game as well. Anyways, things are, well, pretty much explained, at least in general. Let's jump into what happens when somebody gets mad at me. And oh crap, Germany's gotten mad enough to declare war. Oh, god dang it. Anyways, the war's been raging for a little bit. I'm still actually at it. It's about like 2.5 hours now into my game, and I'm still at it, but I figured I should probably get this video recorded and try to upload it and hope today the internet works. But here was a scenario battle where the enemy cruisers were coming. Now, at first, I looked around and couldn't find the enemy cruiser, and suddenly, hey, look, there is a report indicating which direction the enemy cruiser's at, and there was a little tiny marker on the map. So immediately I change course and I bring my fleet, the flagship and the supporting destroyers and stuff like that. I'm going to bring them along and try to engage this lone enemy ship, or maybe two enemy ships that are here. Okay, now, as you'll see in this particular battle, it's currently running in real time. Of course, as you end up spotting ships and end up getting to sort of more closer combat situations, you might want to run it more as a turn-based or in short bursts, like 5-minute in-game, which is a couple of like turns. Really, how you prefer to fight these battles really is sort of up to you. It does have a tendency of sort of replicating, I guess, the time scale of a real naval battle, sort of super compressed. But if you pay attention to the amount of time that typically happens, the battles can go on like all night long sometimes. Like, for the sake of sinking like one ship, sometimes you'll be at it for a while, right? So here, this enemy cruiser came and sunk one of my merchant ships. Darn him. So I'm giving chase to the best of my abilities. Luckily, I have a pretty big fleet, heavy cruisers and, I've got light cruisers, got some destroyers, that I'm pretty much going to be able to chase down this lone enemy light cruiser and probably sink them, but it takes a while, and it's no joke. These games, in terms of if you were to look at them, how they were doing it in real time, it takes a while. Like, to even sink one light cruiser is not an easy thing to do, which I think is much more accurate to how things would have been, I guess, in real life, where like sinking a single ship isn't actually the easiest thing in the world. Of course, you can, like I said, have design flaws. Like, I screwed up when I was playing it for the very first time. Overemphasis on speed, not enough emphasis on armor, and boy, you can have your ships detonate and then you will lose them right away. But typically, they do take some punishment, unless, of course, you're running into things that are completely beyond your ship's capability to handle. So if you were like a light cruiser and you ran into, let's say, a later war battle cruiser, well, good luck to you then, because those things are gonna kill you. Anyhow, I'm giving chase to this light cruiser. The light cruiser is doing its absolute best to try to run away from me. This pursuit. Currently, my destroyers are still sort of in line with me, and as you can see, they're kind of sticking around, but I might end up changing it to, there we go. See, I'm going to change my destroyer squadron, make them independent, so they are going to go running off and sort of doing their own thing, and hopefully that will allow me to kind of close the noose on this enemy light cruiser and get him to maybe turn towards my heavy cruiser so I can pummel him into oblivion. Anyways, my destroyers are going to speed up and hopefully chase him down, and oh, my light cruiser had a signal issue, misunderstood a signal, and now it's going to do something silly. And that happens, because in real battles, that actually did happen, right? Signal problems cause ships to do the wrong thing. Anyhow, as you'll see, my destroyers are now doing their own thing. They're going to go chase down this light cruiser, while my heavy cruisers continue to shoot when they can, with what armament they can. Gun arcs are actually a thing. Remember during the ship design, you get to see like your turret arcs and stuff like that? It actually matters, because if you're actually chasing, you don't actually have a lot of guns that are going to be in on the action. So you're constantly having to think about course and distance to the target, so you don't want them to get away from you. You also don't want them to in a situation where maybe they can get torpedoes on you. And so you have a lot of these little decisions that you got to make. Now, this scenario mode, from what I've heard, compared to another game that the same developers developed, I can't remember the name for, this is a little bit more on the simplified scale, right? There is another one that was a lot more complicated, but still, I think this approach is good. I mean, it is easy enough to pick up, but at the same time still has some complexity to it, and it's not easy to get things to go the way you want as well. Actually, the only time things have gone completely the way that, I want is when I have access to my pre-dreadnought battleships, and then I get to have to raid a convoy, and the convoy appears in front of me, and it's like, alright, time to go feast with my battleship. I think something has just happened. Yes, you've noticed that the time has switched, and suddenly the map changes the way it looks. And where I had easy vision on this light cruiser earlier, well, suddenly it's nighttime and vision deteriorates, and you'll notice that as vision deteriorates, I lose sight of ships, and I lose sight not only of the ship, but I also go from a known ship of a known class to an unknown ship, and potentially even misidentified, right? Because you'll see right there, it was a light cruiser, but hey, you might have them drop out of range, come back in, and suddenly your guys are misidentifying them, and it's a heavy cruiser. Oh, and now we got to add some rain to it as well. So sea states and things like that apparently also change, weather changes, and it adds various elements to the game. As for exact specific effects, I'm not 100% sure yet. I'm still learning the game, as I said. Still, I've got this enemy light cruiser in a pretty good spot for my ships to engage. I don't know what my destroyers are doing. They're just like, I don't know what the hell they're doing. They're just out there doing their own thing. Hopefully they're going to come in here and maybe launch an attack. I don't know, but hey, we've got this enemy ship surrounded, so we're just pummeling them down. Alright, there's the destroyers. They're coming in. They're going to launch a torpedo. Oh, there you see the little like white marker that went flying? I'm not sure if you saw that. It's like really short, but that was a torpedo. Had that hit, it would have been pretty lethal amounts of damage. But anyhow, once again, lost vision, have to turn back around, reacquire the vision, and continue to pummel this enemy ship here. Oh. Sinking one ship is actually not easy if they're a well-designed ship and well-protected. Hey, there it is! Last ship belonged to Germany in this scenario has been sunk. And there you go. I got some pretty significant amount of points, and there you go. I got some pretty good victory points. And of course, in this game, as you accumulate more and more victory points, you can get more and more favorable, I guess, conditions. And also, during this time that you're fighting wars, there's always going to be, hey, you know, the army wants something, so can the Navy take a budget cut to give the army, stuff like that. All decisions you've got to make, and there's a lot of depth in this game, and there's a lot of replayability as well. Like I said, events change from game to game, the research changes from game to game, so there's a ton of things for you to do. Anyhow, if you're interested in this particular game, yes, I know the graphics are not the world's most amazing thing, but if you can look past that and you can see the depth of the gameplay, and you think this is something you are going to enjoy, and you're wondering where to get it, there's a link that's coming up on your screen now to the page for the store for this particular game. It's not on Steam, it's not on a distribution platform, and I bought the game as well, so this is not like they sent me a review copy. No, I went ahead and bought this game. It's $24.99, and, you know, if it looks like your thing, go for it, give it a shot. I am having quite a lot of fun with it. There's a ton, like I said, of replayability. You can try different nations, different designs for your ships. So that's it. That's all I have to say for Rule the Waves. Hopefully you guys will have as much fun with this game as I'm having right now. And so until next time, folks, take care of yourselves, and I will talk to all of you again next time.